Welcome back. Tonight we are looking into the Namibian education system and unpacking experimental versus memorization learning. Our Namibian institutions of higher learning preparing students for a knowledge-based economy where our strength lies not in our ability to recall knowledge, but in our ability to apply new knowledge and learn while applying active learning, thereby creating new knowledge as a catalyst for innovation at the backdrop of reduced economic activities and unemployment. To unpack all these big words that I have just read, they were joined by Shiwana Ndeunyama, the Manager of Organizational Learning at the University of Science and Technology, NASTA. And Shiwana, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Off the bat, a very happy new year to you and all the best of compliments for this year.
Everything of the very best to you too.
All right, let's start off with understanding the education system and its place in relation to the rest of the world. How does the Namibian education system currently compare?
I think in its entirety, the Namibian education system is progressive, and our syllabi and its contents is of without a doubt, an international standard. And we've successfully moved or transitioned from the Cambridge system to having our own local system, which maintain that sort of standard. But I still think we need to rewrite the narrative of learning content delivery. We seem to be lagging behind with respect to the learning culture or our learning style. There seems to be a bit of an inconsistency in the manner in which learning content or educational content is being delivered across schools across the country. Like many developing nations, we've got more of a rote learning style as opposed to an active or experiential, if you like, learning style. Rote asks the question, can you learn? Well, can you recall what you've learned and can you place it on paper? Whereas active and experiential learning goes further on to ask the question, based on what you've shared on paper, can you interpret it, do you understand it, and can you apply it? For something to be considered experiential or active learning, it needs to contain elements of processing, conceptualization, discovery, and of course knowledge application. And university academics will tell you very well, based on Bloom's taxonomy model, which is a very scientific term, but not foreign in academia, emphasis is placed on higher order thinking skills that include analysis, synthesization of knowledge, creation of knowledge, and evaluation, whereas rote learning, memorization as it were, is really relegated to remembering.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question, which is now having come from the public school system myself, and I believe you're also part of, you also went through the same system. There was so much focus on how much you could memorize. Now you realize after you finish grade 12, you realize, well, knowing when Hitler died won't get you a job. You know, they fed us with so much information that after school, it was irrelevant. Does this style or this style of learning, or as you said, rote learning, does it still have a place in our education system currently?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't think we should discard rote learning or memorization altogether. I'll give you an example. Spelling, for instance, in elementary school, you know, the fact that the word 8 is spelled in that strange way, we don't need to understand the Latin philosophy behind that. You just need to know it so that you can rote learn. Things you can't rote learn, however, are, for instance, you and I, you said we are a product of the education system. Those of us that took up mathematics were taught the Pythagoras theorem. That is a concept that you cannot memorize. So if I ask you today, or if you ask the majority of those that learned the Pythagoras theorem, they'll be able to comfortably sort of recite it. But only a fraction of those can actually apply it. So just to also give you a sense, research has also shown that learners are able to retain only 20% of what they hear and only 10% of what they read. And if you compare that with active or experiential learning, learners are able to retain 90% of what they do. So that will give you a sense of the value of experiential learning in our country. But the focus then becomes that of knowledge application to simply that of knowledge retention.
I don't know if you, on social media, there was a very funny picture of, you know, how they had a locust. I think it was life studies or something that we did in primary school, where you had to learn the parts of the locusts, and there was a caption that read that, yes, while in Africa we're learning the parts of an insect, people in Japan, you know, in India, were teaching their kids about how can we apply the knowledge. Now, bringing me back to the question of, like, I did history. Now, I realized after school that it didn't really matter whether I knew what year the Nazis were defeated or what year Hitler died. But the question was, why do we still have it, knowing that this thing will not serve us any good? After all this research, after all this knowledge that has been brought together by all these great minds, we still follow that same path. Why?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I beg to differ a tad bit, it's important to look at things in context. So for the most part, learners in high school have a sense of where or which field they want to apply. So if you want to be a historian or a politician, having a sense of the Nazis and your various political spheres would be relevant, because once you have an understanding of the past, you can be able to get a sense of the future. Same applies to the locus theory you gave. If you want to pursue veterinary sciences, that's some fundamental that you ought to know. But what universities like NUST are doing, for instance, is in the first year, each and every student is expected to take up a course called basic science. And that sort of levels the playing field as they enter the system on all spheres of the sciences, mathematics, and the histories.
Now, I know we've spoken about this previously, but one of the biggest questions is, how do learners that are leaving the basic education system prepare themselves for institutes of higher learning, now whether they're going to the universities or going to vocational training institutions, and how do they apply that thing of becoming a job creator rather than a job seeker?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's important that prospective students need to appreciate that the realities of the job markets are very dynamic, and the opportunities that are presented are not as apparent as they seem to be. So if you've got friends, for instance, brothers and sisters sitting at home with a degree and they've been unemployed for 2 years, so something, even if it's your passion, you're probably not going to hop onto the same bus. So learners also need to get a sense of
being realistic.
Being realistic in terms of their expectations. I mean, we have all these lovely fields, but within the Namibian context, it's not relevant. Institutions of higher learning are churning out graduates that are sitting at home. And even in your STEM fields, we have engineers, for instance, now sitting at home. So it's important to, at a national level, to get a sense of what our human resource inventory is and understand. And I know the NSFAF has got a list, which at NUST we use when we give bursaries to our staff, as to what are the priority areas and what are those areas in which the country is really lacking in terms of skills development.
And how do you think that can be changed? How do we bridge the gap between the institutes of higher learning and the industry? Now, I understand that NUST is doing pretty well in always keeping in touch with the industries and giving relevant type of subjects to their graduates, so that upon graduation, they have relevant skills that can be applied in the job market. But all in all, how do you think that can be improved across the board?
Yeah, the Namibian University of Science and Technology, for instance, has a dedicated unit, the Cooperative Education Unit, that serves as a platform for consultations with with industry, where we've got dedicated industry liaison officers that seek to place our learners in industry in their relevant fields. In fact, as a requirement for NUST students to complete their studies, they need to undergo this sort of WILL program, the Work Integrated Learning Program. However, as we rightfully stated, I was part of a committee with the Bank of Namibia, where they undertook a skills audit, and they invited various players. They invited NUST, they invited some of our academics and admin staff to understand what does our syllabi look like and what are the needs in the marketplace, specifically with regards to the financial sector. And in so doing, we're able to tailor our programs to meet and address the challenges of the marketplace.
So you've got your degree, you're about to enter the job market. The biggest question is, what are employers looking for in prospective employees? Yes, they look at your CV and say, well, fantastic, cum laude, and all those nice things. But what exactly are they looking for apart from what is on paper?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because it makes for an interesting debate. Understandably so, most employers, they ask for experience. They ask for experience. Why? Because they know that theory doesn't mean much unless you've practiced it. So what learners can essentially do to ensure that they are appealing to employers is essentially prepare themselves from an emotional intelligence point of view. I mean, at NUST, for instance, if you come to NUST, the first thing that we ask our staff members is, what what is your role here at NUST? Specifically academics. And then they go on to tell you, well, I'm a professor in electrical engineering and I'm schooled in this particular area. And we, at the point of induction, we stop them dead in their tracks and we tell them, listen, you've got one role here at NUST and one role only. And it's in line with our vision, educating leaders for the knowledge economy. So what it appeals to employers is an appreciation of their value system, of the philosophical value system, as well as their vision and mission. Everything else, I mean, the fact that you've got your degree and your qualification just gives you a step into the interview. But it's that sort of emotional intelligence and that alignment to the vision of the organization that gives you that sort of competitive advantage.
Talking about emotional intelligence, there's this ongoing debate about the fact that it doesn't really matter how much good grades you get in university. When it comes to the workplace, it's a completely different playing field because you're working with people and not necessarily just documents. The question here is, which one takes you farther? Is it your IQ or is it your EQ?
Again, that makes for an interesting debate. There is a book that gives concrete expression to this debate. It's in fact a New York Times bestseller by Robert Kiyosaki, Why A Students End Up Working for C Students. And in his book, he argues that the education system or the schooling system was created to churn out employees as opposed to your entrepreneurs in the making, your visionaries and your dreamers who are your C students, and your A students are your typical good readers, your good memorizers, and your good testers. But and I was having a discussion with a friend of mine, professor at the Namibia Business School, and he shared some very interesting insights following some research that was conducted by some psychologists that suggest that one's success is linked more closely to emotional intelligence, simply other than academic achievement, which I strongly agree with. So Robert Kiyosaki in his book advocates for a focus of the education system on concepts as opposed to just what and why to how you can apply it.
Yeah. The grade 12 results are coming out very soon. I think maybe speaking under correction, but during the course of this week. And we've all been there. It's nerve-wracking, even though you knew you prepared properly for it, you studied well. It's nerve-wracking, to wait for those results. But obviously, some of them are going to pass, and as it is, and that's how life is. Some won't make it. What's your advice to both of the two groups of people here, those that are going to make it and those that won't make it, and also maybe just touch a little bit on the importance of perhaps having a gap year in case you're not really sure about what you want to study and what you want to pursue?
Yeah, the gap year, I mean, that's all preference. I mean, if you've got the financial means and also the comfort to take on a gap year, but the reality of the matter is that most Namibians haven't got that sort of comfort, specifically at the backdrop of reduced economic activity. We really need everybody to step up and go out in the economy and apply themselves, come up with innovative solutions to, stimulate economic activity. But for those that have written their examination, there's an interesting phenomena in the Namibia education system. What universities use to accept learners is based on your mid-year results. Now, as you can appreciate, the standards at various schools differ. So specific individuals are accepted based on their mid-year results, but when the matric finals come out, the guy that wasn't accepted, who received higher, is actually missing out. So we might have to look at a standard measure of assessment for our grade 12 candidates when we sort of accept the learners. However, for those that have completed grade 12 and have not received any placement and have attained good grades, or as it were, will receive good grades, there are late registration platforms that are shared in the public domain where you can attend on the given day based on the predetermined dates, and based on the availability of spaces you can then register for a course of your choosing.
And the ones that don't make it, what's your word of advice for them?
For those that don't make it, there's no such thing as failure unless you obviously don't get up. If you get up, you've obviously got a second try. You also need to get a sense of what your area of interest is, and then you cater to that sort of interest. If you're not a mathematician and there's someone who's forcing you in that sort of mathematical sphere, it's probably the reason as to why you're not doing so well. So that's where passion comes in. Understand where your passion is, but then again strike a balance between your passion and the realities of the job market. If you have the comfort of starting up something yourself with the capital, probably backed by, you know, some sort of financial platform, by all means, but you need to be realistic in that sense.
Shawana, unfortunately, it's always a great pleasure having you on the show, and I'm sure we'll still have you in the future for similar topics. But thank you so very much. That was Shawana Ndewnyama, the Manager of Organizational Development and Learning at the University of Science and Technology, NAST, talking to us on how institutions of higher learning can best produce job creators instead of job seekers. Business